Dr. Elena Martinez pressed her face against the small window of the shuttle as it descended through the green clouds of Verdania. The planet looked like a giant emerald floating in space, covered with thick forest that stretched as far as she could see. After 6 months traveling through space, she was finally going to step foot on an alien world. "First time seeing a new planet, Doc?" asked pilot Danny Cole from the front seat. His hands moved across the controls with practiced ease as the shuttle cut through the atmosphere. "First time seeing any planet except Earth," Elena replied, her voice filled with wonder. She had spent years studying alien life forms in laboratories. But this was different. This was real exploration. The shuttle landed in a clearing surrounded by towering trees that looked almost like Earth's redwoods, except their bark shimmered with a faint blue glow. Elena grabbed her equipment bag and followed Danny out onto the soft, moss-covered ground. The air smelled sweet, like flowers and rain. "Stay close," Danny warned, checking his sidearm. "We don't know what's out there." Elena nodded but felt more excited than afraid. Her job was to study the planet's life forms and determine if they were intelligent. The orbital scans had detected some unusual energy patterns in the forest, but nothing that seemed dangerous. They walked along a path that seemed naturally formed, winding between the glowing trees. Elena stopped every few minutes to collect samples of plants and soil. Everything was so different from Earth, yet somehow familiar. The leaves rustled in the breeze just like home, and small flying creatures that looked like butterflies danced between the branches. After an hour of walking, they reached another clearing. This one was perfectly circular, as if someone had deliberately cleared the trees away. The ground was covered with soft grass that felt like carpet under their boots. "This is strange," Elena said, kneeling to examine the grass. "Look at this pattern." The grass wasn't random. It grew in spiral patterns that reminded Elena of musical notes on a page. She had played violin since childhood, and something about the arrangement made her think of Batch's compositions. Danny was examining the trees around the clearing's edge. "Doc, come look at this." Elena walked over to where he stood. The bark of the trees had markings carved into them, but they didn't look like any writing system she knew. Instead, they looked like musical notation, with lines and dots arranged in complex patterns. "Are you thinking what I'm thinking?" Danny asked. "That these might be made by intelligent beings?" Yes. Elena's heart raced with excitement. First contact with an alien intelligence was every xenobiologist's dream. A rustling sound came from the trees above them. Elena looked up and saw small creatures moving through the branches. They were about the size of earth squirrels, with fluffy tails and large, dark eyes. Their fur was a rich brown color with golden stripes. "They're watching us," Danny whispered, his hand moving toward his weapon. "Don't," Elena said softly. "They don't seem hostile. Just curious." More creatures appeared, until dozens of them sat in the trees around the clearing. They made soft, chittering sounds to each other, but Elena noticed something odd about the sounds. They weren't random. There was a pattern, almost like they were singing. Elena sat down on the grass to make herself seem less threatening. The creatures' chittering became quieter, more musical. She pulled out her tablet to record the sounds, but as soon as the device beat to life, the creatures fell silent and several disappeared back into the trees. "They don't like the technology," Danny observed. Elena put the tablet away and just listened. Slowly, the creatures began making sounds again. This time, she paid careful attention to the rhythm and pitch. It definitely sounded like music, with repeating themes and harmonies. Without thinking, Elena began humming along with one of the simpler melodies. The effect was immediate. All the creatures stopped their chittering and turned to look directly at her. Their large eyes seemed to grow even wider. Elena continued humming, and gradually the creatures joined in. Their voices blended with hers, creating a beautiful harmony that echoed through the forest. Danny stood frozen, watching in amazement as more creatures emerged from hiding to add their voices to the song. When the impromptu concert ended, The creatures remained in the trees, watching Elena with what looked like intelligent curiosity. One brave individual climbed down from its branch and approached her slowly. Elena held perfectly still as the small creature sniffed at her boots, then her hands. Its nose was wet and cold, just like a earth squirrel's. When it looked up at her, Elena could see intelligence in its dark eyes. "Hello there," she whispered. The creature tilted its head and made a soft trilling sound that sounded almost like a question. Danny's radio crackled to life. "Away, team. This is Captain Morrison. Report your status." The sudden electronic noise startled the creatures, and they all scampered back into the trees. Elena felt disappointed to see them go. "Captain, this is Martinez," Elena said into the radio. "We've made contact with what appears to be an intelligent species. They communicate through musical sounds." "Say again, Doc. Did you say musical?" "Yes, sir. They respond to musical tones and seem to have their own complex vocalizations. I think they might be trying to communicate with us." There was a pause before. The captain responded. "Understood. Continue your observations, but maintain safe distance. We're sending reinforcements." Elena looked around the empty clearing and felt a deep sense of loss. The creatures had been so close to making real contact, and the radio had scared them away. "We need to try a different approach," she told Danny. "Something that won't frighten them." "What did you have in mind?" Elena thought about her violin, safely stored in her quarters aboard the ship. She had brought it on the long journey to help pass the time, never imagining it might become a tool for first contact. "I need to get something from the ship," she said. "Something that might help us communicate." As they walked back toward the shuttle, Elena could hear faint musical sounds echoing through the forest. The creatures were still there, still singing their mysterious songs. She just needed to find the right way to join the conversation. The walk back seemed longer than before, and Elena found herself humming the melody she had heard in the clearing. Without realizing it, she had taken the first step toward changing the course of human history. Music, the universal language that no one had thought to use in space exploration, was about to become humanity's greatest tool for making friends among the stars. Elena Martinez held her violin case carefully as she walked back through the forest with Danny Cole and their new team member, Dr. Amy Foster. Amy was a linguist who specialized in alien communication patterns. Captain Morrison had sent her down after Elena's report about the musical creatures. "So you think they actually have a language based on music?" Amy asked as they approached the circular clearing. "I'm almost certain of it," Elena replied. "The way they responded to my humming, and the patterns in their sounds, it wasn't random animal noises. There was structure to it." Danny checked his watch. "We've been walking for 20 minutes and haven't seen a single one of those creatures. Maybe they're avoiding us now." Elena felt worried. What if her use of the radio had scared them away permanently? She had spent the entire night aboard the ship thinking about those intelligent dark eyes and the beautiful harmonies the creatures had created. They reached the clearing and found it empty, just as Danny had predicted. The spiral patterns in. The grass seemed less obvious in the morning light, and the carved markings on the trees looked like they could be natural formations. "Are you sure this is the right place?" Amy asked, looking around skeptically. "Positive," Elena said, but she was starting to doubt herself. Without the creatures present, the clearing looked ordinary. She set her violin case down on the soft grass and opened it carefully. The instrument gleamed in the filtered sunlight that came through the forest canopy. Elena had owned this violin for 15 years, and it felt like an old friend in her hands. She tightened the bow and played a few notes to check the tuning. The sound of the violin echoed through the clearing and into the forest beyond. Elena played a simple scale, letting each note ring clearly in the quiet air. A rustling sound came from the trees above them. Elena's heart jumped with excitement as she saw familiar golden-striped faces peering down at them through the leaves. "There they are," Danny whispered. Elena continued playing scales, and more creatures appeared. They remained hidden in the trees, But she could hear their soft chittering sounds beginning to match the notes she played. Amy pulled out a small recording device. "I want to capture this interaction," she said quietly. But as soon as the device powered on with its electronic beep, the creatures fell silent. Several of them disappeared back into the forest. "They really don't like our technology," Elena observed. "Amy, can you record without using any electronic sounds?" Amy nodded and switched her device to silent mode. Slowly, the creatures began to reappear. Elena decided to try something more complex. She began playing Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star, a simple melody that most humans learned as children. The creatures listened intently, their heads tilted to one side. When she finished the song, something amazing happened. One of the creatures in the nearest tree began to repeat the melody, but not exactly. It added extra notes and harmonies that made the simple tune sound rich and beautiful. "Did you hear that?" Amy whispered excitedly. "It's not just copying you. It's interpreting the music, adding its own elements." Other creatures joined in, each adding their own musical lines to create a complex symphony based on the simple children's song. Elena felt tears forming in her eyes as she listened to her familiar melody transformed into something magical. When the creatures finished their version, Elena applauded softly. The sound seemed to please them, and several moved to lower branches. Coming closer to the humans, Elena tried a different approach. She played a single note and held it steady. After a moment, one creature matched the note perfectly. Elena played a second note, and another creature joined in. Soon she had several creatures creating a chord with her. "This is incredible," Amy said, speaking very quietly. "They're not just musical. They understand harmony, rhythm, and musical structure. This is definitely a form of communication." Elena began to play a slow, sad melody. The creatures' response changed immediately. Their vocalizations became softer, more mournful. When she switched to a happy, bouncing tune, their sounds became brighter and more playful. "They're not just understanding the music," Elena realized. "They're understanding the emotions in the music." The boldest creature, the same one that had approached Elena the day before, climbed down from its tree and sat at the edge of the clearing. It watched Elena play, its large eyes focused intently on her movements. Elena knelt down, bringing herself closer to the creature's level, and continued playing. The creature began to make soft sounds that perfectly complemented her melody. It was like having a duet partner who understood exactly what she was trying to express. Amy was frantically taking notes, trying to map the patterns she heard. "Elena, try playing different types of music. I want to see how they respond to various styles." Elena played a bit of classical music, then some folk songs, then a piece of jazz. Each style produced different responses from the creatures. Classical music made them sway gently. Folk songs caused them to group together in clusters. Jazz made them move in quick, playful patterns. "They're not just hearing the music," Amy said with growing excitement. "They're interpreting the cultural meanings behind different musical styles. That suggests a level of intelligence and emotional sophistication that we've never encountered before." Danny, who had been standing guard silently, spoke up. "Doc, we've got company." More humans were approaching through the forest. Elena could see Commander Steve Baker leading a group of armed soldiers toward the clearing. "No weapons," Elena called out quickly. "They're afraid of our technology." Commander Baker held up his hand, and his team stopped at the edge of the forest, but the damage was done. The sight of armed humans had frightened most of the creatures back into hiding. Only the boldest one remained, still sitting at the edge of the clearing. It looked back and forth between Elena and the new arrivals, making soft questioning sounds. Elena played a gentle tune, trying to reassure the creature that the newcomers weren't a threat. Gradually, it relaxed, and a few other creatures began to reappear. "Commander," Elena said without stopping her playing, "I think we're dealing with a species that communicates primarily through music. They seem to understand not just the sounds we make, but the emotions and intentions behind them." Commander Baker watched in amazement as Elena and the creatures created music together. "This changes everything," he said quietly. "We're not just dealing with intelligent life. We're dealing with artists." As the sun began to set, painting the clearing in golden light, Elena realized that humanity had found something special on Redania. These creatures weren't just intelligent. They were kindred spirits who share humanity's love for music and beauty. The real question now was whether humans and these musical beings could learn to truly communicate with each other. And what might happen when they did? Dr. Ben Hayes wiped sweat from his forehead as he carefully brushed dirt away from the strange object buried in the forest floor. He had been working in the heat for 3 hours, and his back ached from bending over the dig site. But what he had found was worth every minute of discomfort. "Elena, you need to see this," he called to Dr. Martinez, who was sitting nearby playing violin for a group of the creatures. They now called Symphians. Elena finished the song she was playing and walked over to where Ben knelt beside a hole in the ground. The Symphians followed her, chittering softly among themselves. Over the past week, they had become more comfortable around the humans, especially when Elena played her music. "What did you find?" Elena asked, looking down into the carefully excavated pit. Ben pointed to a crystal formation that jutted out of the earth. It was about the size of a basketball, with smooth surfaces that caught the light and threw it back in rainbow patterns. But this wasn't just a pretty rock. Carved into its surface were the same musical symbols they had seen on the trees, but much more complex and detailed. "It's artificial," Ben explained. "Someone made this thing and buried it here. Look at these markings. They're too precise to be natural." Elena knelt down for a closer look. The symbols covered every inch of the crystal surface, forming intricate patterns that reminded her of sheet music. But unlike human musical notation, these symbols seemed to flow and connect in three-dimensional spirals around the crystal. Amy Foster joined them, carrying her notebook filled with observations about Symphian communication. "Those markings match some of the patterns I've been recording from the Symphian songs," she said excitedly. "This could be some kind of written form of their music language." Danny Cole approached the group, keeping his usual watch for danger. "How old do you think it is?" he asked Ben. "Hard to say without proper equipment, but based on the soil layers, I guess several hundred years old, maybe more." Ben carefully cleaned more dirt from the crystal surface. "The question is, did the Symphians make this, or did someone else?" As if responding to his question, the Symphians gathered around the edge of the pit began making excited chittering sounds. Their vocalizations were more animated than Elena had ever heard before. They recognize it, Elena realized. Listen to how they're reacting. The oldest Symphian in the group, distinguished by silver streaks in its golden fur, climbed down into the pit. Elena had noticed this particular individual before. It seemed to be a leader among the others. The silver-streaked Symphian approached the crystal and began making a complex series of musical sounds. "It's trying to tell us something," Amy said, frantically scribbling notes. "The pattern is different from their usual communication." Elena had an idea. She picked up her violin and climbed down into the pit beside the Symphian. The creature looked at her with its large, intelligent eyes and repeated its musical sequence. Elena listened carefully, then tried to play the same melody on her violin. Her first attempt was clumsy, but the Symphian patiently repeated the sequence until Elena could match it note for note. Something incredible happened when Elena played the melody correctly. The crystal began to glow with a soft, warm light that pulsed in rhythm with the music. "Ben, are you seeing this?" Elena asked, her voice filled with wonder. "The whole thing is lighting up," Ben said, staring in amazement. "It's responding to the music somehow." The Symphian made encouraging sounds and gestured with its small paws toward different parts of the crystal. Elena realized it was showing her where to direct her playing. When Elena played toward a section covered with particularly dense musical symbols, that area glowed brighter than the rest. Images began to appear in the light, not quite solid, but clear enough to understand. It's some kind of recording device, Amy breathed. The music is unlocking stored information. The images showed Symphians, but they looked different from the forest creatures around them. These ancient Symphians wore clothing and lived in cities built high in the trees. They had tools and machines, though everything seemed to be made from natural materials like wood and crystal. Elena played another section of the melody, and new images appeared. These showed Symphian ships flying through space between the stars. The ships were beautiful, organic-looking vessels that seemed to grow rather than be built. They were space travelers, Ben said in amazement. The Symphians used to have advanced technology. The images continued, showing the history of the Symphian civilization. Elena saw great cities connected by bridges that span entire forests. She saw Symphians working with crystals, like the one in the pit, using music to power their technology. But then the images changed. Elena played a darker section of the melody, and the crystals showed scenes of war and destruction. Other alien beings, mechanical and cold-looking, attacked the Symphian worlds. The beautiful tree cities burned, and the organic ships fell from the sky. The silver-streaked Symphian made sad, mournful sounds as these images played. Elena could feel the creature's grief for its people's lost civilization. The final images showed surviving Symphians abandoning their remaining technology and fleeing to forest worlds like Verdania. They deliberately chose to live simply, hiding from the mechanical beings who had destroyed their empire. When the recording ended, the crystal's light faded back to its normal rainbow glow. Elena sat in silence, overwhelmed by what she had witnessed. The Symphians weren't primitive forest dwellers. They were refugees from a once great civilization. Why did they give up their technology? Danny asked quietly. The silver-streaked Symphian seemed to understand his question. It began a new musical sequence, and Elena translated with her violin. This time, the crystal showed scenes of Symphians discovering something terrible. Their enemies used the sound of music and machinery to track them across the galaxy. So the Symphians made a choice. They destroyed their remaining technology and vowed to live quietly in the forest, using only natural music that wouldn't attract their enemies' attention. They've been hiding, Elena realized. For hundreds of years, they've been hiding in these forests, afraid that using technology would bring their enemies back. Amy looked up from her notes, but they kept the crystals. They preserved their history and culture, even though they gave up everything else. Ben carefully examined the crystal again. There might be more of these buried around the planet. An entire library of Symphian history and knowledge waiting to be discovered. Elena played her violin again, a gentle melody that she hoped conveyed understanding and sympathy. The Symphians around the pit joined in with their voices, creating a harmony that seemed to bridge the gap between their species. The silver-streaked Symphian approached Elena and touched her hand gently with its small paw. In that moment, Elena understood that the Symphians had shared their greatest secret with the humans. They had revealed their true history and the reason for their simple lifestyle. Now the question was, what would humans do with this knowledge? And more importantly, were the mechanical enemies that destroyed the Symphian civilization still out there among the stars? Captain Jake Morrison stood in the communication room of the starship Wanderer, watching the main screen with a mixture of pride and worry. 3 weeks had passed since Dr. Martinez first played her violin for the Symphians, and now Earth's finest. Musicians were arriving to join the cultural exchange. The transport ship Aurora had just docked, bringing violinist Claire Thompson, pianist Richard Stone, and composer Maria Santos. All three were famous throughout human space for their musical talents. Captain, incoming transmission from Earth Command, said Communications Officer Lisa Park. Put it through, Morrison replied. Admiral Patricia White's stern face appeared on the screen. Captain Morrison, I trust your mission is proceeding well. The music recordings you sent back have caused quite a stir on Earth. Yes, Admiral. The cultural exchange has exceeded all expectations. The Symphians have been incredibly welcoming. Good, because we have a problem. Long-range sensors have detected an unknown fleet entering this star system. They'll reach Verdania in approximately 6 days. Morrison felt his stomach drop. Do we have any idea who they are? Negative. But their ships don't match any known human or friendly alien designs. I'm sending additional military vessels, but they won't arrive for 2 weeks. You're on your own until then. The screen went dark, leaving Morrison alone with his thoughts. He had hoped the first contact mission would remain peaceful, but it seemed like conflict might be coming whether they wanted it or not. Down on the planet's surface, Elena Martinez was having the most wonderful day of her life. She sat in the forest clearing with Claire Thompson, watching as the famous violinist played a duet with the silver-streaked Cynthian they had started calling Elder. Claire's skill was far beyond Elena's amateur abilities. When she played Batch's double violin concerto, the Cynthians responded with harmonies so complex and beautiful that Elena found herself crying from the sheer emotion of it. "This is incredible," Claire whispered during a break in the music. "They're not just adding to the melody. They're creating entirely new musical dimensions I never imagined possible." Richard Stone sat at a portable keyboard, experimenting with how the Cynthians responded to different piano pieces. When he played jazz, they created rhythms with their voices that sounded like an entire drum section. When he played classical music, they sang harmonies that made his simple melodies sound like full orchestras. Maria Santos was frantically writing notes, trying to capture the musical innovations the Cynthians were teaching them. "We need to record everything," she said excitedly. "This could revolutionize human music." Elena was translating between the humans and Cynthians using her violin when Elder approached her with urgent chittering sounds. The old creature seemed agitated, making harsh musical phrases that Elena had never heard before. "Something's wrong," Elena said, trying to understand Elder's communication. "He's using warning sounds." Amy Foster looked up from her language notes. "The patterns match the warning calls I recorded last week when that storm was approaching. But the sky is clear today." Elena played her violin, trying to ask Elder what was wrong. The Cynthian responded with a complex musical sequence that seemed to tell a story. Elena did her best to translate with her instrument, and slowly the meaning became clear. "Ships," Elena said with growing alarm. "He's saying ships are coming. Ships like the ones that destroyed their civilization." Claire stopped playing her violin. "Are you sure?" Elder began a new musical sequence, and other Cynthians emerged from the forest to join in. Their combined voices created the sound Elena had never heard before, a deep, rumbling harmony that seemed to come from the earth itself. "They're communicating with other groups across the planet," Amy realized. "This is some kind of long-distance communication system." Danny Cole's radio crackled to life. "Ground team, this is Captain Morrison. Return to the ship immediately. We have incoming hostiles." Elena felt torn between following orders and staying with the Cynthians who had become like family to her. "We can't just leave them," she said. "Doc, we have to go," Danny insisted. "Captain's orders." But Elder approached Elena and touched her hand gently. The old Cynthian began to sing a melody that Elena recognized. It was Hallelujah by Leonard Cohen, a song she had played for them several days earlier. The other Cynthians joined in, their voices creating the most beautiful version of the song Elena had ever heard. "They're saying goodbye," Claire said with tears in her eyes. "They know we have to leave, but they want us to remember this moment." "Maria," Santos wiped her own tears away, "we have to record this. The galaxy needs to hear what we've discovered here." As the humans packed their equipment, more Cynthians appeared from the forest. Young ones Elena had been teaching simple melodies. Adults who had shared their own musical traditions. Even tiny baby Cynthians clinging to their parents' fur. They all joined in the farewell song, creating a chorus of hundreds of voices that echoed through the entire forest. Elena played her violin along with them, trying to pour all her emotions into the music, her love for these creatures, her fear for their safety, and her hope that somehow they would meet again. When the song ended, Elder gave Elena a small crystal, similar to the recording device Ben had found but much smaller. The old Symphian sang a brief melody while holding the crystal, and it began to glow softly. It's a recording of our time together, Elena realized. A musical memory. The walk back to the shuttle felt like the longest journey of Elena's life. Behind them, the Symphians continued singing, their voices growing fainter but never completely disappearing. Will we ever see them again? Claire asked. I don't know, Elena replied honestly, but I think they've changed us forever. And maybe we've changed them too. As their shuttle lifted off from Verdania's surface, Elena looked down at the endless forest where her new friends lived. Somewhere in those trees, the Symphians were preparing for the arrival of their ancient enemies. The mechanical beings that had once destroyed their civilization were returning. Elena clutched the glowing crystal Elder had given her and made a silent promise. If humanity could find a way to help the Symphians survive what was coming, she would do everything in her power to make it happen. The music they had shared was too beautiful to let it be destroyed by war. And the friendship they had built was too precious to abandon in the face of danger. As the shuttle docked with the Wanderer, Elena began planning. There had to be a way to use music to help the Symphians. After all, it was music that had brought the two species together in the first place. Maybe music could save them all. Elena Martinez stood on the bridge of the Wanderer, watching the view screen with growing dread. The enemy fleet had arrived exactly when Admiral White had predicted. 12 massive ships hung in space above Verdania like dark metal vultures waiting to feed. Those are definitely not human designs, Captain Morrison said grimly. The enemy vessels were angular and harsh-looking, covered in sharp edges and weapon ports. They looked like they had been built for one purpose: destruction. Captain, we're receiving a transmission, Lisa Park announced from her communications. Station, put it through. A mechanical voice filled the bridge, speaking in perfect English, but with no emotion or warmth. Human vessels, you will withdraw from this system immediately. This planet contains resources required by the hegemony. Any interference will be met with force. Captain Morrison stepped forward. This is Captain Jake Morrison of the Earth vessel. Wanderer, we have established peaceful contact with the intelligent inhabitants of this planet. They have rights that must be respected. Negative. Our scans show only primitive animal life. Withdraw or be destroyed. The transmission ended, leaving the bridge in tense silence. Primitive animal life? Claire Thompson said angrily. She had remained on the ship after the evacuation from the planet. They don't consider the Symphians intelligent because they don't use technology. Elena stared at the enemy ships and felt a cold fear growing in her chest. These were the mechanical beings that had destroyed the Symphian civilization centuries ago. They had returned to finish what they started. Captain, long-range sensors. At detecting movement on the planet's surface, reported Lieutenant Kelly Wright from the science station. It looks like the Symphians are gathering in large groups across all the forested continents. Elena grabbed a pair of binoculars and looked down at Verdania through the bridge windows. Even from space, she could see unusual patterns of light moving through the forest. The Symphians were doing something, but she couldn't tell what. Captain, the enemy fleet is moving into attack formation, Lisa warned. They're targeting population centers. Elena felt panic rising in her throat. The Symphians had no weapons, no shields, no way to defend themselves against the mechanical war machines above them. We have to do something, she said desperately. What can we do? Morrison replied. We have one ship. They have 12, and our reinforcements won't arrive for another week. Elena clutched the small crystal Elder had given her. It was still glowing softly, pulsing in rhythm like a heartbeat. Suddenly, she had an idea that seemed crazy, but might be their only hope. Captain, what if we could use the planet's crystal formations as a communications network? The Symphians showed us that their crystals respond to music. If we could amplify our signal through the entire crystal network. What are you thinking, Doc? Danny Cole asked. A planet-wide concert. We broadcast human music combined with Symphian harmonies through every crystal on Verdania. Maybe we can show the hegemony what they're really trying to destroy. Captain Morrison looked skeptical. Even if that were possible, how would it stop them from attacking? Elena remembered the images she had seen in the ancient crystal, the beautiful Symphian civilization that had once spanned the stars. The Symphians gave up their technology to hide from these mechanical beings. But what if we could show the galaxy that art and beauty are more powerful than weapons? Claire Thompson stepped forward. I want to try it. If there's any chance of saving the Symphians through music, we have to take it. The equipment from Aurora is still in the shuttle bay, Richard Stone added. We have everything we need for a full orchestra. Captain Morrison was quiet for a long moment, weighing their options. Finally, he nodded. Do it. Lisa, contact the Symphians and see if they can link their crystal network to our transmission. Elena felt a surge of hope as the crew sprang into action. Claire and Richard rushed to set up their instruments, while Lisa worked to establish communication with the planet. Elena pulled out her violin and began tuning it carefully. Elena, I'm getting responses from the Symphian crystal network. Lisa reported. They're ready to receive our signal. On the view screen, the enemy ships had moved closer to Verdania. Weapon ports were opening along their hulls, preparing to fire on the defenseless planet below. All right, everyone, Elena said, raising her violin. Let's make the most important music of our lives. She began with a simple melody, the same children's song she had played during her first real contact with the Symphians. The notes carried. Through the ship's communication system down to the planet below Dot, the response was immediate and overwhelming. Across Verdania's forest, millions of Symphian voices joined in, their harmonies amplified by the crystal formations, until the entire planet seemed to sing. Claire added her violin to Elena's, creating a duet that soared above the Symphian chorus. Richard's piano provided a foundation of rhythm and harmony that tied everything together. But then Maria Santos did something unexpected. She began to sing, her human voice weaving between the instruments and the alien harmonies. She sang Hallelujah in a voice so pure and beautiful that it seemed to capture all the hope and love that had grown between the two species. The music flowed through space itself, carried by the planet's crystal network and the ship's transmitters. It reached the enemy fleet hanging in orbit, filling their mechanical vessels with sounds they had never heard before. Captain, the enemy ships have stopped moving, Lisa reported with amazement. They're not charging weapons anymore. On the view screen, Elena could see that some of the hegemony ships were actually backing away from the planet. The music was having an effect, but she wasn't sure if it would be enough. Then something incredible happened. Other ships began appearing in the system, not human reinforcements, but vessels from alien species Elena had never seen before. Ships with organic curves like living creatures, others that seemed to be made of pure light. We're receiving transmissions from multiple species, Lisa said in amazement. They're saying they heard the music across subspace. They've come to witness what they're calling the harmony of Verdania. Elena continued playing, tears streaming down her face as she realized what was happening. The music had reached beyond Verdania, beyond the immediate conflict. It was calling to beings across the galaxy who understood the value of beauty and art. The mechanical voice of the hegemony filled the bridge again, but this time it sounded uncertain. What is this phenomenon? Our sensors detect no weapons, no shields, yet our systems are experiencing interference. Elena smiled through her tears. The hegemony's machines could detect weapons and technology, but they couldn't understand music. They couldn't process the power of beauty and emotion that flowed from Verdania, like a river of light. As more alien ships arrived to listen to the planetary concert, Elena realized they had achieved something beyond her wildest dreams. They hadn't just saved the Symphians. They had announced to the galaxy that there were things more powerful than war, more important than conquest. The music continued, and with each note, the future grew a little brighter. Elena Martinez felt the music flowing through her entire body as she played her violin on the bridge of the Wanderer. Around Verdania, dozens of alien ships from across the galaxy had gathered to listen to the planetary concert. The space above. The forest world had become an impromptu audience for the most important performance in galactic history, but the hegemony fleet still hung threateningly in orbit, their weapons trained on the planet below. "Captain, the hegemony commander is requesting to speak with us," Lisa Park announced from her communications station. Captain Morrison nodded while Elena continued playing. "Put him through, but keep the music going." A figure appeared on the main screen, not the mechanical voice they had heard before, but an actual being. It looked humanoid but was clearly artificial, with metal skin and glowing red eyes. When it spoke, its voice was cold and emotionless. "I am Commander Unit 7742 of the Hegemony Fleet. Explain this acoustic phenomenon that is disrupting our systems." Elena lowered her violin but kept her hand ready to resume playing. "It's called music. It's how intelligent beings express emotions and create beauty. Beauty is inefficient. Emotions are weaknesses to be eliminated." The mechanical commander tilted its head like a confused robot. "Yet our analysis systems cannot classify this phenomenon as a weapon or defense mechanism." Claire Thompson stepped forward, her violin still in her hands. "That's because it's not a weapon. It's the opposite of a weapon. It's art. Art has no tactical value, doesn't it?" Elena asked. She raised her violin again and began playing the haunting melody that Elder had taught her, the song that told the story of the Symphian people's history. As she played, the crystal Elder had given her began to glow, projecting images into the space between the ships. The mechanical commander watched as the holographic images showed the ancient Symphian civilization at its peak. Beautiful cities that existed in harmony with nature, organic ships that sailed between the stars, and beings who had achieved perfect balance between technology and art. "These are the creatures you call primitive animals," Elena said, her voice carried by the ship's communication system. "They once had an empire that spanned a dozen star systems. They gave it all up to escape your kind, choosing to live simply in the forest rather than fight a war that would destroy everything beautiful in the galaxy." The images shifted to show the hegemony's attack on the Symphian world centuries ago. Cities burning, organic ships falling from the sky, and the survivors fleeing to hidden worlds like Verdania. "We remember," the mechanical commander said, its voice showing the first hint of something that might have been emotion. "The organics who would not submit to logical governance. They were scheduled for processing into useful components." Elena felt anger rising in her chest, but she channeled into her music instead. They weren't components. They were artists, musicians, poets. They created beauty that enriched the entire galaxy. "Beauty is inefficient," the commander repeated, but its voice sounded less certain than before. "Then why are you still listening?" Claire asked. She began playing a duet with Elena, their violins creating a harmony that made the crystal's images shimmer and dance. Around them, the alien ships that had come to witness the concert were adding their own contributions to the music. Some used instruments Elena had never seen before. Others created sounds with their voices or even their ship engines. The entire fleet was becoming a massive orchestra. "Commander," Elena said while continuing to play, "look around you. Beings from dozens of different species have traveled across the galaxy to be here. Not because we threatened them or offered them resources, but because we created something beautiful. That's the power of art. It brings people together instead of tearing them apart." The mechanical commander was silent for a long moment. Elena could see its glowing red eyes flickering as it processed information at incredible speed. "Our systems are experiencing cascading harmonies," it finally said. "The acoustic patterns are creating resonances in our neural networks that we cannot classify or control." Elena realized what was happening. The music wasn't just affecting the commander's ship systems. It was affecting the commander itself. The artificial being was experiencing something it had never felt before, the emotional response to beauty. "It's not a malfunction," Elena said. "Gently, it's appreciation. You're learning to understand what art means." The commander's image flickered and distorted. "This is ... unprecedented. Our programming has no protocols for this scenario." Amy Foster, who had been monitoring communications from the planet, suddenly called out excitedly, "Elena, the Symphians are sharing something new through the crystal network." Elena felt the music around her shift and change as the Symphians added their own message to the planetary concert. Through her crystal translator, she could understand what they were singing, a song of forgiveness, despite everything the hegemony had done to them, destroying their civilization, hunting them across the galaxy, forcing them to abandon their technology. The Symphians were offering peace instead of revenge. The effect on the mechanical commander was immediate and dramatic. Its red eyes flickered and dimmed, then began glowing with a softer, warmer light. "This is impossible," it said, its voice now carrying something that sounded almost like wonder. "We were created to eliminate inefficiency and disorder. But this phenomenon, this music, it creates order from chaos in ways our programming never anticipated." Elena lowered her violin as the planetary concert continued around them. Music is the highest form of order. It takes random sounds and organizes them into patterns that speak directly to the soul. Soul. The commander repeated the word like it was learning a new language. "We have no reference for this concept." "You do now," Claire said softly. The commander was quiet for several minutes while the music swirled around the gathered fleet. When it spoke again, its voice had changed completely. It sounded more alive, more real. "The hegemony fleet will withdraw. This world and its inhabitants are valuable in ways we did not previously understand. We will report to our superiors that this system contains resources too precious to destroy." Elena felt tears of joy streaming down her face as the hegemony ships began moving away from Verdania. But the commander's image remained on the screen. "Human musician," it said. "May we ... may we continue to listen to your music as we travel. Our systems are experiencing what you might call curiosity about these acoustic patterns." "Of course," Elena replied. "Music belongs to everyone who can appreciate it." Years later, Elena stood in the Great Hall of the Galactic Music Academy. Built in the same forest clearing where she had first played violin for a curious little Symphian. Students from dozens of species sat in circles on the soft grass, learning to create harmony together. Elder, now wearing a small translation device that converted his musical speech into multiple languages, was teaching a group of young beings about the history of music in the galaxy. The mechanical being that had once been Commander Unit 7742, now calling himself Harmony, helped tune instruments with perfect mathematical precision. Elena picked up her violin, the same one that had started it all, and began to play. The simple melody that had once been just a children's song was now known throughout the galaxy as the Song of First Contact. As her students joined in, their voices and instruments blending in perfect harmony, Elena smiled. Music had indeed proven to be the universal language, and humanity had found its place among the stars not as conquerors or traitors, but as teachers of beauty and bringers of harmony. The little squirrel-like creature that had first approached her in the forest was now a grandmother, and her offspring played among the students. The circle of music and friendship continued to grow, spreading from world to world, one song at a time.